And welcome back to Bengal Bites, a podcast about the Cincinnati Bengals from one fan's real, honest perspective. As always, I'm your host, Derek. This is episode 84. This is the season 3 inaugural episode. 2025 season has officially started. Free agency has kicked off. There's lots of news to cover in this episode. So we're going to cover everything that has gone on in the Bengals news since our last episode, which was about a month ago in mid-February. Lots of comings and goings to talk about, players being added, players being released, signings, new coaches, all kinds of stuff to talk about. Even though there haven't been any games, not a ton of new players added to the roster, but a couple to discuss, a couple important players that are no longer going to be on the Bengals who have been staples in the Cincinnati community. So lots of things to talk about in this episode. Let's get into it. Since our last episode back in February, one of the most important stories in my mind was the retirement of the legend Sam Hubbard, number 94, Cincinnati native, went to Moeller, played at Ohio State as a Buckeye just up the road, and then was drafted by the Bengals, I want to say in 2017. And at the age of 29, Sam Hubbard has decided to call it a career in the NFL. He was most likely going to be released by the Bengals, but he didn't want to play for any other team in the NFL. This is his hometown team, the Bengals, team that drafted him. So he decided to just retire. He was happy with what he had done so far, and time to move on with the next chapter in his life, as they say. And I know Sam Hubbard was involved with some charitable organizations in the community, so I am assuming he's going to stay in the area and continue to do some of that work. And who knows, we may see Sam Hubbard showing up in, a role. Dave Lapham is getting up there in years. I know he's like trying to stick around for his 50th year with the team and all that stuff, but eventually they're going to have to phase Dave Lapham out and bring in some new blood into the Bengals media. Maybe that could be somebody like a Sam Hubbard. I don't know. But there's lots of things that Sam Hubbard can do. Now that he's going to be, a millionaire, he's getting paid plenty of money over the last few seasons with that contract. That was one of the reasons why the Bengals were going to have to let him go. He was just going to be too expensive for the production. And people were talking about, well, maybe he would take a pay cut to stick around. I don't think Sam Hubbard wants to play for like a veteran minimum deal anymore. He's got plenty of money, so no reason for Sam Hubbard to do that. But Sam Hubbard gave everything to the team while he was playing. He played through injuries. Sometimes, the production obviously wasn't what you would have hoped, but Sam Hubbard went out there, and even though he wasn't producing and giving the team a bunch of sacks and big plays, he was still out there because they didn't really have any better alternatives. They had got, Cam Sample tore his Achilles tendon in preseason training camp. Jeff Gunter retired before the season even started. So Bengals were thin at defensive end to begin with. They had Trey Hendrickson, holding up his end of the bargain with 17 and a half sacks, leading the NFL. But Sam Hubbard wasn't really doing much on his side. So they're going to look to replace Sam Hubbard somehow. Now, they did re-sign Joseph Osai to a 1-year, up to $7 million contract. So kind of betting on himself, coming back to the team that Joseph Osai was drafted by and that he's familiar with. Who knows what he could have gotten from other teams as a free agent. But $7 million for 1 year, not bad for him. It's going to be an increase in his pay, obviously. But can Joseph Osai be that full-time starter opposite Trey Hendrickson? We're going to have to see. And, speaking of Trey Hendrickson, kind of jumping ahead here, Trey Hendrickson has not signed a contract extension, but he's still under contract with the Bengals. He's requested a trade. Nothing has come of that yet, and part of it's probably because teams don't want to give up a bunch of trade capital for a defensive end who's going to be 30 years old and coming to the end of his career and also wants a new contract. So if a team were to trade for Trey Hendrickson, it would kind of be a similar situation with the Jets and Hassan Reddick last year, where the Jets traded for Hassan Reddick because he wanted a new deal with his team, the Eagles. Jets didn't give him a new deal. They just said, no, just come in and play. And he's like, well, no. The same reason I didn't want to play for my old team, I still don't want to play because I still don't like the contract. So he sat out for most of the season last year, finally got out of the Jets, and I think he signed a new contract. I forget where Hassan Reddick went, but teams don't want that to happen to them and Trey Hendrickson, where they get Trey Hendrickson and he's going to be just as unhappy because he's making about $16-17 million, whereas other players at his position, we just saw Myles Garrett for the Cleveland Browns just get $40 million a year on a new contract, or somewhere, in the high 30s. You got guys like Nick Bosa around 35. So Trey Hendrickson and his 17 or whatever he's making, I mean, obviously to the average fan, that's a ton of money. But when other people at your same job are making twice as much money as you feel like you're kind of being shortchanged. So there's still some negotiations to be had over the summer with Trey Hendrickson. This may drag on, but luckily, one thing that will not be dragging on this offseason will be the contracts of Ja'Marr Chase and Tee Higgins. That's probably the biggest story that has happened since the last episode. Was Ja'Marr Chase surpassed Myles Garrett, just barely one-upped him by $250,000 a year on his new contract. He signed now it's kind of misleading because Ja'Marr Chase still has the 5th year of his rookie contract where he's going to make $21.8 million. But then after that is when this new contract is going to kick in. So it's a 4-year extension. He's got 5 years under contract with the Bengals total. The 4 years, $161 million makes him going to be the top paid non-quarterback in the NFL. That's like the new designation. They can't say top paid player in the NFL anymore because that's obviously quarterbacks. Quarterback contracts have gone through the roof, namely with guys like Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott, Josh Allen, and so on and so on. They just keep upping each other, and it's getting astronomical as the salary cap is also going up every year. Let's not forget about that. This is not in a vacuum where the players are just getting paid more out of nowhere. It's because the salary cap goes up by I think this year it went up by about 23 or 20, close to $25 million, let's call it. And so as that cap goes up, that means teams are able to spend more on the players. And lest you forget and want to complain about, all the players are getting paid so much money, don't forget that the owners get paid what all the players combined get. So when you see one player gets this, the other player gets this, all of that money just add it all together, and that's what the one owner gets for themselves. So don't feel sorry for the owners because they are, as much as the players are making, the owners are making way more money than the players just for themselves. But anyway, Ja'Marr Chase, he gets what's coming for him. Tee Higgins, they franchise tagged Tee Higgins. If they had kept him on the franchise tag, it would have been about $26 million and some change there. Tee Higgins signed a 4-year, $115 million contract extension, so that's going to put him around $28 million a year, so a little bit more than he would have been making under the franchise tag. But the important thing here is that Tees get 2 years fully guaranteed. He's got that guaranteed money instead of just playing on a 1-year contract and then having to go through this process again of going through free agency, because it's kind of like moving. It's a stressful situation. You don't know where you're going to be, where you're going to end up. And for Tee Higgins, it sounded like he grew up as a Cincinnati Bengals fan, idolizing Chad Ochocinco. He wanted, he's from Tennessee, so not too far away from Cincinnati. And so this was a very comfortable spot. I didn't think, it didn't seem like he really wanted to leave. And as we know, Tee Higgins changed agents. He was with David Mulligetta, and then he switched over to Ja'Marr Chase's agent, Rocky Arsenault, and they shouted out the agent in their press conference that they did together multiple times. They're like, shout out to the agent, Rocky, such a great job. So I don't know, that's kind of a low-key dig at the previous agent, the other agent was effing around, not getting me paid. Well, now I got the new agent, so good job, new agent, bad job, old agent. But I'm just happy that Tee Higgins and Ja'Marr Chase got the contracts out of the way relatively early in the offseason, so we don't have to go through all summer of having all these talking heads on, the media bashing the Bengals, calling them cheap and they're, a two-bit organization, poorly run. What are they doing? Not signing all their good players and yada, yada, yada. You know the story of all this stuff. So we don't have to hear about that anymore. Now they got their two. Now it's completely flipped around because the people have to have something to talk about and something to argue about on these stupid shows. So it's flipped around from why aren't the Bengals paying all their best players to now, did the Bengals pay too much? Oh, is this actually a good idea? It's the same people who are saying, I can't believe they haven't signed these guys. Now that they signed them, they're like, whoa, was that the right decision? It's like, I have really backed off on my consumption of NFL media, especially since the season has ended, because this is the time of year. Ironically, I'm recording a podcast talking about the NFL, and here I am saying, who gives a shit about what these people are saying? But honestly, some of this stuff is really just a moot point. Speaking of moot points, I don't know if I've made this point on the podcast, but one of the stupidest narratives I hear is the talk about number one receiver or number two receiver, and is Jamar Chase the number one? Is Tee Higgins the number one? Is he a 1A or a 1B? And if he was on another team, would he be the number one receiver? Here's a newsflash for all you morons. There's no such thing as a number one receiver. It doesn't exist. It's made up. It's completely fabricated by people who don't know anything about football, have never played, but they think that because they fill out their fantasy football roster and they put some guy at wide receiver 1, they get in their minds that wide receiver 1 is a real thing, and that's how NFL general managers and coaches actually think about it. I'm going to blow some people's minds right now. Tee Higgins plays X. If you don't know what that is, it's probably because you never played football. But Tee Higgins is an X, okay? He's a really good X. Jamar Chase plays Z. He's probably the best Z in the NFL right now. A lot of people are confused. The ZX, that's not on my fantasy football roster anywhere. What does that mean? Look, if you play football, you would know what X is the split end. He's on the line of scrimmage. He's getting wide, split wide, getting the outside cornerback. Z, flanker, sometimes goes in motion. He could be inside, he could be outside. The more dynamic, usually, of the two primary wide receiver positions. A lot of teams now are, going with a third wide receiver. So sometimes Jamar Chase can switch between Z and they call it F on the Bengals for flanker, I'm assuming. But that was kind of the Tyler Boyd position. Jamar Chase rotated in and out, but Tee Higgins is an X. He's a prototypical X wide receiver. He's big, he's strong, he can out-physical anybody on the outside. You can leave him one-on-one on an island, and he's going to win his matchup. He's a matchup nightmare for defenses. And so a lot of times when people talk about number one, wide receiver 1 and all this stuff, maybe they're talking about who's going to be the defense's primary concern, who the defense is going to be focusing on stopping the most. But in Joe Burrow's mind, Joe Burrow doesn't think about, oh, this is my number one target. It's not like he's going out every play and trying to throw it to Jamar Chase. He's going to throw it to whoever the defense leaves open on that play. If it's Mike Gesicki, if it's the running back, Chase Brown out of the backfield, whoever it is, that's who Joe Burrow is going to throw it to. It's not like every play they come out and say, okay, now we're going to start at wide receiver 1, Jamar Chase, and then if he's not open, then we're going to throw to wide receiver 2, Tee Higgins, and then if he's not open, we're going to go to option 3. No. Joe Burrow comes out, reads the defense, and receiver 1 on whatever given play is whoever is open. Now, obviously, Jamar Chase, production, talent, all that stuff is greater than Tee Higgins, but that's the reason why Jamar Chase was drafted where he was and Tee Higgins was drafted where he was. And you can see it, in the numbers, the way defenses play, that Jamar Chase is obviously the more threatening of the two wide receivers, and he got paid more, and as well he should be. But the whole notion of wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, it's just, like I said, it's a pointless exercise. It's kind of one of those questions, philosophical arguments of if a tree falls in the forest and there's nobody to hear it, does it make a sound? It doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter what number you want to assign to Tee Higgins. Like he said, just talk about it as he's a really good wide receiver, and that's all you need to say. So I totally agree with it, and it just gets annoying when you hear people go back and forth about number one, number two, on and on and on. None of that stuff really matters. Tee Higgins is an X, Ja'Marr Chase is a Z, and they're still looking for the F, because as sure as shit is not Jermaine Burton or Charlie Jones. We'll have to see about Andre Iosivas, but if a game-changing wide receiver is available in the draft, I wouldn't put it past the Bengals. You gotta swing, but they only have 6 draft picks. And if they're going to put all this money into these 2 wide receivers, they still need to rebuild that defense. That's one of the things, is signing these players. And there's some other signings, some other contract extensions we're going to get to here in a moment. But as great as it is to celebrate keeping these 2 players, these are the same 2 players that they had on the team for the last, 3 or 4 seasons. So they didn't necessarily get better. They didn't necessarily improve the roster, but they made sure that we didn't get worse. The Bengals would have been worse if they would have let Tee Higgins go or trade him. And there was some rumblings about maybe the Bengals would be able to trade Tee Higgins, but I doubt any team was willing to give up like 2 first-round draft picks to get Tee Higgins, or something that would have really made the Bengals consider giving him up. Because, the bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. So if you've got a Tee Higgins already on the roster and you can make it work, it's probably a better idea, unless somebody comes in with there's so much amazing draft picks that you can't turn it down. But it's kind of like, a situation, this is kind of a bad example now, but like, a year ago, if you had, the most popular car in the world, the Tesla Cybertruck, and, I want to keep my Cybertruck, but if somebody's going to pay me double, maybe I'll find a new car, And for anybody that did that, that's probably a good idea, because I just saw a news story today that said all the Tesla Cybertrucks have been recalled because parts of the trim were flying off at random. So great job by Tesla. I will not be purchasing any of their products anytime soon. I'm sure a lot of people are joining me in that sentiment. But just how quickly things can change for lots of people. 1 minute you're on top, the next minute you're being vilified and called a fascist. So interesting times we live in. But speaking of interesting times, some other news that was going on for the Bengals. They signed defensive tackle B.J. Hill, who is actually older than Sam Hubbard, but he's not retiring. He's re-signing and continuing his career. He's on a 3-year, $33 million deal with $16 million guaranteed. So hopefully the Bengals get some dividends, because they really need defensive tackle help. Speaking of which, they signed free agent TJ Slaton from the Green Bay Packers. He's supposed to be a run-stopping guy, something they sorely missed with DJ Reader off the team last year. Jay Tufele, speaking of which, he signed with another team in free agency, so he's not going to be on the Bengals. Bengals are going to rely on the second-year players, McKinley Jackson and Chris Jenkins, to take a step forward and contribute more than they did in their roles last year. Bengals also signed Oren Burks, linebacker from the Philadelphia Eagles. He stepped in due to injury and started for the Eagles in the playoffs alongside Zach Bond. I think that's because Nakobe Dean went down for the Eagles. So Super Bowl champion, getting paid on a 2-year deal. I think it was maybe like $7 million or maybe $7 million per year, something like that. Not an enormous deal, but I'm not sure if he's going to come in and be a starting linebacker. It's still kind of yet to be seen what they're going to do about Jermaine Pratt, because Jermaine Pratt had requested a trade out of the Bengals. He's still on the roster, though, and they haven't made any moves with him. Probably haven't gotten any amazing offers. So Jermaine Pratt, he's still under contract. I would assume if he's still on the team, he would still be the starter next to Logan Wilson. But Logan Wilson, he missed most or a good portion of last season because he was out with knee surgery. So we're assuming Logan Wilson is just going to come back and be better than ever, or back to where he was, but there's no guarantee. So maybe the Bengals are getting a little bit of insurance in signing Oren Burks. They also re-signed Cody Ford, offensive lineman, a versatile guy who was moving all over, playing tackle, playing guard. So they got him on a 2-year contract, so showing a little bit of commitment there. A good depth piece. I'm not sure that he's going to be in the mix for a starting position, but he was a second-round pick next to, Orlando Brown, his old teammate. Maybe they could see some chemistry. I don't know. I hope that they get some better options on the offensive line than Cody Ford, because he's got, a relatively low ceiling. He's never going to be great, but he was okay. The Bengals also brought back a familiar face in Samaje Perine, running back, who was playing with the Chiefs last season. Before that, he played for the Denver Broncos. And speaking of narratives I never want to hear again, there were so many people talking about how Samaje Perine, the Bengals offered him the exact same deal, but he just decided to go play for the Denver Broncos instead. It's like, come on, man. Obviously, the Broncos offered him more money. That's why he went to play there. If the Bengals had offered him literally the same, and he could have just stayed in Cincinnati, I don't think he would have left. So he's coming back. Not much money on this deal. Pretty team-friendly deal. I think it was like 2 years, $4 million or something like that. So not a ton of money, not a huge risk for the Bengals either. But they really, and so Khalil Herbert, the running back that the Bengals traded for during the season last year, the rare in-season Bengals trade, they gave up their 7th-round pick in this upcoming draft for Khalil Herbert, and then he sat on the bench for most of the second half of the season. He only played any significant amount of snaps in the Bengals' last game of the season. And that was when Chase Brown was injured. They needed that win against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh. He came in and had a full workload in that game, and then that was it. Now he's off to sign with some other team. So that was kind of not a waste, but it really put into perspective how lacking the Bengals roster was, especially on the running back position. I know Chris Evans went down with a patellar tendon injury early in training camp, but the fact that they didn't have anybody, they didn't draft anybody with all those 10 draft picks, they couldn't pick up one running back who could contribute at all. They kept Travion Williams on the roster for some reason, even though he couldn't play, obviously. So that's why they had to go back and get Khalil Herbert. So the Bengals have 6 draft picks and a lot of holes to fill on this roster. I don't know if running back is going to be one, since Chase Brown showed that he can step up and carry the ball. When he had that one injury towards the end of the season where he sprained his ankle trying to slide before the goal line, messed himself up. But other than that, he was dependable all the way through the season. So if the Bengals are going to rely on Chase Brown, he still needs somebody to come in, give him some blows. Samaje Perine, like I said, he's okay, but he's getting up there in years. I think he's over 30 at this point, so he's not going to be necessarily like an explosive option out of the backfield. So hopefully the Bengals get a little bit more depth there at running back. One other player who is going to be returning for the Bengals on offense, tight end Mike Gesicki. They signed him to a 3-year contract extension worth about $25.5 million, biggest payday of Mike Gesicki's career. And I don't know what the market was going to be for Mike Gesicki out on there with other teams, but it seems like kind of a lot to pay for an older tight end who doesn't really block, but he's kind of like tight end version of Tee Higgins. Like, he's 6'6", he can catch, he can run pretty well and get open. So I'm sure Joe Burrow is going to be very happy to see him returning, because he did have great chemistry with Mike Gesicki on multiple games I can think of where Joe Burrow was scrambling outside of the pocket and Gesicki just felt the right window in the defensive zone to get open. And there were a number of plays like that where he was on the same wavelength and Joe Burrow knew where Mike was going to be. Mike knew where Joe wanted him to be, and they had a good chemistry together in that passing game. So hopefully that's going to continue to grow and develop. And Bengals have really needed a good tight end receiving option, going all the way back to Tyler Eifert pretty much. They had C.J. Uzomah and Hayden Hurst, and they were, decent, but nobody really as good as Mike Gesicki. So that all looks good for the Bengals on offense. But as we said, they need the offensive line to kind of take a step forward. Still a question of, Cordell Volson is going to be on the roster, but is he going to be a starter? He got benched towards the end of the year just because he was getting run over by guys like Cam Hayward, and that's been his Achilles heel for most of his career. It's just he doesn't have a strong anchor. Guys can pretty much just overpower him and run straight over the top of Cordell Volson, and he's not getting any better because he was like 25 years old when they drafted him. He's got to be in his late 20s by now, so he's hit his peak, and the peak was not that great. But anyway, Bengals, they've been making some moves. Some of those moves have been some released players. So Sheldon Rankins, this was not a surprise. A mistake, in hindsight, not a good signing for the Bengals. At the time, really kind of a surprise that they gave a guy who's 29, didn't really have a ton of production, gave him a big contract. So they have moved on from Sheldon Rankins, admitted their mistake. And Sheldon Rankins re-signed with his old team, the Houston Texans. So he spent 1 year in Cincinnati, got a nice big paycheck, and then goes right back to his old team. Another player that the Bengals released that was not a surprise, Alex Cappa, right guard. He was, he had dealt with a couple injuries in his legs for the past few seasons, and just similar to Cordell Volson, but at a slightly not as bad as Cordell Volson. But still, he was getting run over, letting guys get around him pretty easily, and pressure allowed, sacks allowed. Joe Burrow was running for his life. A lot of the time, it was because of Alex Cappa or Cordell Volson at the interior guard position. So they're going to get rid of Cappa, and he signed with the new team, the Las Vegas Raiders. I think maybe Tom Brady being a part owner and the fact that Alex Cappa played with Tom Brady in Tampa Bay, maybe that connection gave them confidence in wanting to sign him. But I was a little bit surprised that Cappa got picked up so quickly after he was released by another team. But what can you do? And Bengals, switching gears here, they did bring in a senior defensive assistant in Sean Desai, who was the former short-term defensive coordinator for the Eagles. I think he only lasted one season before they fired him. I don't even know if he lasted for the entire season before they let him go. And then obviously the Eagles won the Super Bowl this year, so after they got rid of him. So I guess whatever, the more additional coaches they can bring in to the Bengals staff to help out, great. He doesn't have an amazing track record, but I guess it can't hurt. And then the Bengals, they did not receive any compensatory draft picks for the upcoming 2025 draft, even though they lost players like DJ Reader and some other players. They also gained players through free agency. So it was a net no gain for the Bengals. They're not going to pick up any draft picks in this upcoming draft. So 6 picks, no trades are really on the market. I think maybe, if the Bengals could have traded Tee Higgins, or if they can trade Trey Hendrickson for a bunch of draft picks, that would be good. But then there's people who are saying, well, maybe people always say, this draft isn't really that good, and I don't have a first round grade on 32 players. I only have a first round grade on 15 players in this draft. You hear that. That's another one of my pet peeves you hear every draft season is, I only have a first round grade on 16 out of the players in this whole draft. Well, then you need to go back and do some more analysis, because there's 32 picks in the first round. Somebody's going to get picked. So you need to come up with 32 people, whoever it is. But we'll see who the Bengals pick at 17 this year, and if they're able to trade down. Normally the Bengals just stand pat. They don't trade up or down. Very rarely they make moves, but we'll see if anybody is willing to trade up. Maybe there's like some quarterback or running back like Ashton Genty still on the roster that some team is just dying to get, and they want to leapfrog the Bengals for some extra draft picks. Maybe they could make it happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Bengals do what they typically do and just pick their 6 picks and pick the best player that they like. And hopefully those players are able to come in and contribute. Like I said last year, the last few drafts, they haven't gotten a ton of production out of their draft picks, especially early. I mean, we look at, Amari Mims, he had to come and play mostly out of necessity because Trent Brown went down after like 2 games. Amari Mims had to come in. He had an up and down season. Yes, there was some good, but everybody wants to look at, Bengals fans, they want to look glass half full. So the people jumping out of the woodworks to say, oh, he's amazing. He did so great. He was excellent. Like I said, he was okay. He had ups and downs. He showed promise, but he also showed some rookie mistakes, some inconsistency, a little bit of stiffness, not necessarily the quick feet and the athleticism I would like to see, but he is big and he is strong. I'll give him that much. Nobody is bull rushing Amari Mims like they do to Cordell Volson. So he's got that going for him. I'll give it. So it's the jury is still out for me to see how does Amari Mims respond to come back. But we know, Chris Jenkins, he didn't really show a lot. Hopefully he turns it around. And he had like thumb surgery right before the season started last year, so he had to miss the first couple of weeks. Maybe that was a setback for him. Whatever it is, they need more out of him. They need more out of McKinley Jackson. And really, they need anything out of Jermaine Burton. Show up. Be in uniform on Sundays. That would be a good start for Jermaine Burton. I don't want to harp on him too much, but guys like that, Dax Hill, first-round pick. And it's different when we say, oh, a guy's a first-round pick. He's not even playing. First-round picks at the end of the first round are a lot different from first-round picks at the beginning. When you have guys like Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase who are drafted top 5, that's a lot different from guys like Myles Murphy and Dax Hill who are drafted like number 33 or 32 or 31, in the 30s. It's a big discrepancy between those draft picks. So it's not fair to say they're both first-round picks. The expectation should be the same. No, the expectation is more in line with like a Tee Higgins, which Tee Higgins is getting paid. The expectation should be better than what the Bengals have gotten in recent years out of their high draft picks. I mean, Jackson Carman, you know what I'm going. Cam Taylor-Britt, he was looking okay for a while. He had a few interceptions, but again, just like sacks don't make you defensive player of the year if you're Trey Hendrickson, getting a few interceptions don't make you, a good cornerback. You have to tackle, you have to cover guys every play, and as many interceptions as Cam Taylor-Britt has gotten, he's given up more touchdowns and completions and yards and all that kind of stuff. So cornerback is another position that's kind of a question mark for the Bengals in this offseason because DJ Turner, he was looking, up and down. He had some moments, but then he broke his collarbone. So not that that's a devastating injury. Most of the time you can come back from a collarbone and not have too much negative impact. But, Josh Newton, is he going to take a step forward? He was a 5th-round pick. So not, he was kind of a little bit undersized. He's not a huge guy. Is he able to? He made some plays on the ball. I'll give it to him for that. Bengals also brought back cornerback Marco Wilson to the team. That was interesting. So he's a little bit of a depth piece there. Speaking of depth, just wrapping up some of the loose ends. Jalen Davis, cornerback, he's number 35. He's been on the roster for a number of years. He's sticking around because they have not signed or re-signed Mike Hilton. He is still a free agent out there. No word on any contract talks with Mike Hilton. So maybe Jalen Davis steps into the slot role that he's exiting. Bengals also re-signed tight end Tanner Hudson, and Mitchell Tinsley signed as a backup wide receiver for the Commanders. Nobody probably remembers Mitch Tinsley, but I do because he scored 2 touchdowns against the Bengals in preseason a couple years ago in Cincinnati. So I was losing my mind because I was like, well, how come they're not guarding number 86? 86 was Tinsley. So they, as the Bengals tend to do, they sign guys who play well against them. So Sheldon Rankins had like 3 sacks in one game against the Bengals on Alex Cappa. They're like, oh, that guy's pretty good. Let's get him on the team. Same thing here with Mitch Tinsley. But what else? I said Tanner Hudson, they re-signed him to a 1-year contract. A little bit of a surprise, but they re-signed Cam Grandy, Drew Sample. As we know, Eric All is probably going to miss this season with that knee surgery he's going to require. So they're stocking up on tight ends. That was pretty much all of the transactions. Punter Ryan Rico, they signed him. That was kind of a foregone conclusion since he was doing such a good job. 2-year contract extension. He was a exclusive rights free agent anyway, so they were the only team that was going to be able to re-sign Ryan Rico, and they did. And that was pretty much all the transactions and news that I think we wanted to cover in this episode. Anything else that went on didn't really make a huge impact on me, so we're not going to cover it. But we'll be back for the draft. After the draft, that's coming up here at the end of April. So in about 1 month, we'll be able to come back and talk about all the players that the Bengals have drafted, the new additions to the team. I'm not going to do a pre-draft episode because I don't really know any of these guys in college. I'm not a scout, so I'll let the Bengals handle the scouting, and I'll just sit back and evaluate the picks after the fact. As everybody does, as soon as the Bengals pick somebody, I'll go look at his RAS scores, see how good of an athlete they are, see what kind of production they had in college, maybe go watch their YouTube highlight tape if they have one on YouTube, and say, oh, yeah, this guy looks pretty good. Just like I was saying for Jermaine Burton last year. I was like, oh, this is Jermaine Burton. He looks pretty good. So you never know. You never know how it's going to go, but we'll be back in the next episode. But if you've listened all the way, I want to thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to give me your comments, thumbs up, all that kind of stuff. Give me some feedback. Let me know how I can improve this show to make it better for you, the listener. But until next time, I'm going to leave you with a hooday and stay hungry for more Bengal Bites.